Again, remember, it's not the same planet.
Right.
They're still shifting to another version of Earth. But the most likely scenario, the most likely probability for those who are on that path, who choose to match the vibration of unconditional love as much as they possibly can in the here and now, will usually find that large reflections will begin to appear in a more obvious way sometime between your years of 2040 to 2050, and thereafter it will become more accelerated.
Okay, that's good.
As we read the energy now.
Right. So having to do with contact. One moment. Is there a symbol for the like a telepathic phone number symbol that represents the Shah Yael that you can share with us?
It is not given at this time.
Okay. Can you tell us why we're attracted to simulated experiences like video games and movies, and how they might evolve as we do? Is there a higher purpose for them? And why are they becoming more and more immersive and real as time goes by?
In order for you to understand that your physical reality is also unreal, is also a projection of consciousness. And the more immersive the idea of your so-called video games become, or any form thereof of immersive entertainment, the less difference there will be between the idea of something you have consciously created and something you are unconsciously creating, which is the physical reality itself. You are blurring the lines between the two in order to learn that physical reality is also a game, is also a holographic projection of your consciousness. This is one way you break down the barriers of allowing physical reality to seem so solid. So it becomes more flexible, more malleable, more manipulatable as a video game. So ultimately, the same kind of approach, not identical, but the same kinds of approaches you take in terms of being able to make choices in a video game and how things can more easily and magically change according to the choices you make in the game, will ultimately become the way that physical reality is experienced by you as well.
It also kind of reminds me of sports and how they've taken the place of a lot of aggression that maybe used to be acted out in coliseums and things like that.
Yes, it is an apt analogy to some degree.
Talking about the tic tacs that you mentioned before.
Yes.
Can you tell us more about the ships? What color are they? What are the actual dimensions? What do they look like inside? Are there different rooms and chambers? How many hybrid children and adults are on each ship? And where are they currently? Are there very many of them around Earth right now?
They tend to be whitish or pearlescent, though there are some differences and some other choices that have been made for various reasons. They range in size depending upon their function. On average, they might be about 40 feet long in your terms of counting. There are, in most of them, a few different chambers that serve different functions. Hybrid beings that may exist within them, not all of them are the hybrid children, a few times there are, but the hybrid beings that exist within them are mostly Yael, sometimes Shael. The idea is they may harbor others from time to time that are visiting. Their compounds, as you say, their bases are mostly underwater, which is why they're that shape, because they function like submarines as well as spaceships. The population in any given one may simply be, on average, about 10 to a dozen, maybe less, maybe more, depends. They're not large. They will have underground and underwater bases at several places. You already have been alerted to the fact that one of them is off the western coast of your North America in the southern regions near the area you know as San Diego. There are other places around your planet as well that we will talk about at some time in the future.
Um, I've heard of sightings of an underwater ship in Kealakekua Bay.
Yes,
Um, is that one of the locations?
yes, since you asked.
Hey, that's pretty cool. Um, what do you think of human UFO investigators? Do you and other ETs deliberately give them false leads to throw them off track? And do you return to the areas to erase evidence?
Some beings may return to erase evidence. Some beings may throw investigators off track in a variety of ways. We, however, do not.
Yes, of course, that's not your nature. Um,
It's also not our job.
There are civilizations that are near Essassani, yes?
In our parallel reality, there are other star systems that are relatively close by that do have other civilizations, yes.
But in terms of like your solar system, are there any other civilizations close by?
Not naturally, no. There are bases that have been created by us on various planets in our solar system, but no other naturally evolved life, no.
Okay. And as far as things like black holes and stars, what do the different types and masses of stars represent on a spiritual level?
Connections to that many more dimensions, connections to much higher and more powerful frequencies of consciousness.
And what do black holes represent?
Gateways and connections as, shall we say, birthing voids to other universes.
What about the idea of like black holes and white holes?
That's what I just described. Birthing holes to other universes.
So are they one and the same? Like a black hole, the other aspect of the black hole is a white hole?
In many cases, not all cases, but in many cases, yes, they are the functioning corridors or tunnels that allow different universes to flow into other universes, thus interconnecting them all in a variety of ways.
Can you tell us more about the eye and hair color and skin color of Yael, Shayael, and hybrid children in general?
They are similar in many ways to us. They will have a variety of skin colors and eye pigmentations. Again, the Yael look a little more human than we do in terms of your understanding of humanity, so that they can blend among you a little bit more easily. There may be some traits within them that will stand out, like maybe having slightly larger eyes, things like that. But again, there are a variety of tones of eyes and skins and hair, because again, we have all of us in the hybridization agenda gone to the lengths necessary to allow them to look a little bit more like the varieties that exist of humanity on Earth, so they will blend in more easily, and there will be more compatibility genetically for the evolution of the hybrid race known as the sixth.
Okay. Can you tell us something about the Yellowstone super volcano and other potentially world-altering volcanoes like that?
No.
Okay. When we look into the sun, you know, our eyes can't handle that. What's the deeper meaning of this mass of high energy that we is at the center of our solar system? And is it connected to the idea of how we can't meet you in person yet because of the energy level?
It is an analogy for the idea that higher frequencies are not necessarily something that you can handle at this time. Yes, it's an analogy.
Okay. And like when we see faces in nature through natural objects and plants and things like that, is this a form of communication that we're receiving like from the elemental shell of Earth or?
It can be. It can be. Sometimes it's simply your ability to recognize patterns, which is one of your survival traits. But the idea is that it can sometimes be driven by elemental communication or etheric communication, or your own consciousness reflecting something back to you that you may need to see at that particular moment and consider, that may take you into another avenue or another perspective that is important for you to explore. But again, it can be all these things, and it depends on what's going on. It depends on your ability to discern the difference in all those things. You can't necessarily just assume it's one thing or another automatically. You have to investigate and explore and go deeper into each occurrence of that to find out what is actually happening, because it can happen for many different reasons, as we have just described.
So, like for many people, if they look at a mountain, they can start to see a face that then gives the person a feeling of the consciousness of the mountain itself.
Yes. But again, you may be doing that yourself, because
right.
as you expand your consciousness, you will perceive physical reality in a variety of different ways, some of which will be very archetypal, because you're now tapping into the archetypal levels of shells. And therefore, you will reflect back to yourself things in what may seem to be an anthropomorphic way to give you more insight into the consciousness of the planet itself.
Yes. For example, in Arches National Park, it's a dark sky place. So it has incredible Milky Way viewing and everything. And there's a location that's called the Three Gossips. Yes. And if you stand there and you look at the Three Gossips, it starts, as the lighting changes, it starts to really look like there's three people standing there.
Yes.
And it comes with stories and all kinds of things when you're tapping in like that.
Yes, so some of that is what we have already described, but that particular location also connects to the idea of what are called the Kachina spirits.
So elaborate on that idea.
The Kachina beings, as known by many Native American tribes, are beings, interdimensional beings that exist in what we would say are in between the dimensions, in the spaces in between, which is its own dimension. And that particular location not only can be utilized archetypally and etherically and elementally in the way that we've already described with the shells that we've talked about, but because of its particular nature and particular frequency, it can also strongly be used as a vortex to connect to the Kachina spirit beings and further communication between the humans and the Kachinas.
So if you're standing there and you start experiencing these beings through
Yes.
these rock formations, it's basically a permission slip to
Yes.
access. Okay.
To open up your consciousness in a particular way, on a particular frequency domain that allows for stronger and clearer communication with the Kachina spirits.
And also, when you look at certain mountains or rock formations, they may look like animals.
Yes.
And they change as you look at them.
Well, again, for a variety of reasons, you may be doing this, or something may be attempting to communicate with you. It can be many different things. So it just depends on the level in which you're interested in connecting to.
Right, like harmonizing with a certain energy accesses that energy within that rock formation.
Well, yes, in a sense.
To some degree, okay.
It also can simply be a projection of your own consciousness.
Right, yes. You've mentioned that humans have used magic wands to tap into their auric fields. Are there any instruction manuals that exist that can guide a modern person into tapping into their auric field? And are wands useful for tapping into earth energy shells, as you've mentioned?
Like anything, it's a permission slip, but the most modern way for you to begin to understand how the idea of wands originated and why they can work as permission slips is to investigate the idea of waveguides in your modern science.
What? Okay.
Waveguides are usually devices of a certain dimension, and I don't mean dimension in the sense of other dimensions. I mean literally physical dimensionality, mathematical proportions, ratios, that will be tuned to certain wavelengths and frequencies of energy and guide those wavelengths by being of the same dimension or diameter as the wavelength through the waveguide, like a tube, like a wavelength, like an energy wave sliding through a tube of a certain diameter, because that is tuned to that wavelength. So the idea is that this has rendered down into the concept of wands, which is representative of an ancient technology that was understood long ago, and information about that was lost. So you're reinvestigating that again. But the investigation of waveguides can give you the basic understanding that underlies the concept of the so-called magic wand.
Okay. What is your differentiation between surrender and submission? And do they just mean the same thing, or is it?
Well, it depends on the meaning you give them, but we generally talk about the idea of surrender as a letting go of insistence and letting the control that's automatically built into you take over synchronistically and automatically. Submission might, to some people on your planet, be a similar concept, but it can, for most people, come with the concept of subservience, or in a more positive sense, shall we say, giving over to someone else's approach. But it can be done negatively too, by giving your power away to someone else, so to speak, or creating that experience. Of course, you don't ever actually give your power away. You're just pretending that you have. And that can be a negative version of the idea of submission. But the idea of acquiescing to a, shall we say, more reasoned and usable idea, you can allow yourself to submit to it, knowing that it actually may serve a better purpose than anything you may have yourself come up with in the moment. So these things are subtle variations in meaning depending upon how your words are used. And of course, the meanings of your words change over time anyway. So put your intent into using whatever word you use in a more positive light. And for you, that may then be the meaning of the word for you.
Have you or any of your family ever used a Ouija board? Why is it associated with negative energy? And what is the experience like for the entity that's being channeled through the board? Let's start with that.
No, we do not use such things because, again, we have direct connections to the idea of spirit and can communicate freely with them. Again, a Ouija board is nothing more than a permission slip that allows many people on your planet to believe they are capable of creating that connection and having communication with spirit beings. The idea of the negative connotation simply comes from past definitions that are negative and fearful, and therefore it has simply been given this connotation over time that it is a dangerous thing to do, which of course allows an individual to lower their vibration to match more negative frequencies and maybe have more negative experiences with the idea of the energy from their own minds, from their own consciousness reflecting back to them in a negative way, in a dark way. But the idea is simply an idea of a device to, as a permission slip, allow you more efficacy in communicating with spirits because you believe you need such a device to act as a go-between between the physical and non-physical worlds.
So how does is there really a spirit coming through that's communicating, or is it just people channeling?
It can be. It's not coming through the board, literally. It's just connecting to you because you've asked it to. In a sense, you could do the same without the board.
So when someone's using the board and their hands, it starts moving around and everything, is that actually generated by the person themselves in the connected
Remember
state?
What we said about either or?
Yes, it's both, huh?
It can be both. The idea is that your energy may be playing a part, the spirit's energy may be playing a part. The idea is it will depend upon the ratio of either as to what the purpose is being served.
And so here's a ghost question. Are there areas on Earth where ghosts are more easily able to manifest? And how different is their connection to Earth's etheric shells compared to a physical person?
Well, their connection is that it provides in the etheric shell a connection point to the physical world. And therefore, it may be more representative in physical reality that by tapping into the etheric shell, you're going into the so-called real estate that ghosts and spirits already occupy to make it easier for communication to happen. There are certain places on the planet now and then, but these things fluctuate according to different energy patterns of the Earth, where it might dissolve the barrier, so to speak, just to put it in old terms, between the physical and non-physical worlds to make it easier for communication to happen. But really, the truth is just about anywhere is possible. It's not so much the idea of the where as it is the when, because as many of you have experienced yourselves, there are certain timings where the fluctuation in the energy patterns of Earth make it easier, generally speaking, for communication between the physical and the non-physical. And this usually plays out anywhere on the planet when that section of the planet is experiencing the time between 3 a.m. and 4 a.m. So it's more the idea that certain energies fluctuate, certain patterns fluctuate, and there are less densities being experienced at that time around the planet for a variety of reasons we will not go into detail on right now, but it's more a matter of when than where.
Okay. And so I guess our last question is, are trees sentient beings?
Yes, just not sentient in the way you are. They don't express it the same way. But everything has a sentiency because everything is made out of consciousness. Different beings, for example, a rock, may use the idea of consciousness in a different way in order to be considered sentient. But the reason you don't consider them sentient is because they use it in such an alien way. In a sense, a rock will use your consciousness when you observe the rock to know that the rock is there, to make themselves conscious of you. So a rock and minerals are using sentiency and consciousness in a more piggyback way, reflecting off of your use of consciousness to make you aware of them so that they can be more aware of you in the way that makes sense for a communication to occur between you.
Okay, so like, for example, with trees, if you were in a grove of trees where there are trees of various ages,
Yes.
it's possible to experience it like they are tree people and they are various ages. And
Yes.
is that the same idea that you're saying right now with the rock?
Well, no, not exactly, because trees use sentiency and consciousness in a slightly different way that's a little bit closer to the way you use sentiency and consciousness.
So
Not exactly, but a little bit closer.
So that would be why we would be able to perceive them as individuated consciousness that are like people in a sense.
Yes. And at the same time, if you expand your own consciousness to make more connections within yourself and your own species, you can also experience the forest as a single identity. Remember, let go of this concept in many cases of this or that. It's this and that, especially for nature.
Yes, in fact, over and over again in nature, it shows you that having that balance between the collective and the individual needs is very important in being a harmonious planet.
Exactly. In the same way that if you allow yourselves to think of yourself as a collective without invalidating the individual, and think of yourself as an individual without invalidating the collective, you would function more holistically in balance. And all of the things, and many of the things we have discussed today about things like scarcity and resources and what have you, would take advantage of the automatic synchronicity that would come with that point of view, and things would fall into place exactly as they need to.
Well, thank you so much, Bashar. Really appreciate it. Very enlightening.
It is, once again, our passion and our pleasure, as always, to interact with each and every individual and all of you together collectively, because again, you are family, we are family, we are all one, and we are all individuals together on an exploration of consciousness and experience that shall never end. And that is exciting. So now, if you will, prepare yourselves for your imagination meditation exercise.
One of the beings, if possible. I'm open to the idea, and I think it would be a great opportunity if I can have a close contact or come in contact. I guess that's it. Yeah, that's it. Is good to meet you, Bashar, and she's the best.
Well, obviously, we are having contact right now in this particular format, but we understand what is meant. But again, there's a timing to these things that's appropriate not only for the individual, but for the all, for the collective. So again, we would simply suggest that you do your best to follow the formula and remember that acting on your passion means acting to the best you are able to act, which means if you can't do a certain thing that you're excited about, then it's telling you that it's not necessarily the appropriate timing for that expression, but you can act on other things you are able to act on. So do so, and you will accelerate the process of being able to be ready in vibrational states that are appropriate for open contact to happen face to face with other kinds of beings. As we say, we will be giving you other permission slips, other exercises having to do with the idea of increasing the probability of contact when we go through the transmissions of the window, the door, and the gate. So that may be of assistance to you as well in the upcoming months of your 2023 year.
Hello. Hi. First, I want to say thank you for the synchronicity of talking with you.
It is our passion and our pleasure.
Thank you. So, I'm curious to know about a couple experiences I've had.
All right.
I made some homemade tincture and
Of what?
THC.
All right.
And I laid down to take a nap. And I thought that I fell asleep because I felt my entire body vibrating, and it was very intense but very pleasurable. I thought I was asleep. My bed felt like it was levitating on an angle with the head raised higher. And it felt like I was in warm water. It felt like somebody was behind me and wrapping their hand around my waist. And eventually I got up because I thought that I peed my bed. But it turns out that, my bed was dry. And, when I looked at my watch to see how long I was asleep, it didn't detect any sleep. And then I had another similar experience, where it felt like, something externally again was pushing up from my root chakra, and it again was very pleasurable. So yes. I'm wondering what these experiences could have been.
They're preparation states for altered states, fuller altered states that you may achieve later on. It's preparing you and allowing you to get used to certain higher frequencies so that you can more smoothly transition into higher altered states later on.
Okay.
Do you understand?
So was that my own body, or was that another entity?
There are other entities involved peripherally to some degree, but what you are experiencing is your own energy going into altered states, higher frequencies.
Okay. And also, I had come across a YouTube video from Rob Gauthier, the ET
Yes.
Whisperer,
yes.
How to Channel class, and I was doing one of his exercises, and I saw an entity, a being. He appeared to be male, with bluish gray skin and bluish gray hair. He seemed to have a flat affect, no really emotional. He didn't look like emotional at all. He appeared to be like a warrior type, not in a negative way, but just like a warrior type. I'm wondering, did I happen to see somebody that was not reaching out to me, just because I didn't have any specific, person in mind that I was trying to connect with? I just was seeing.
You are experiencing one face, one aspect in symbolic form of your own higher mind.
So is that another entity from like another dimension?
Your higher mind, your spirit self on the higher level.
Well,
One
that was
aspect
me.
of it. Yes, but not you, the physical person only. A bigger representation. Remember that you are in spirit right now. You never leave spirit. That's your natural state. So what you are seeing is a portion, a representation, just one representation of a multifaceted level of your own being in the spirit world.
Were they trying to communicate with me, or
They did communicate with you because the things that you picked up are aspects you contain.
Ah, I see. Are they located anywhere? Where are they located?
On a different plane, here and now, different frequency. In again, the same way that two television programs are located in the same space, but you only see one at a time based on what you're tuned to. All spirit is here. It's just a different frequency, different channel, if you wish.
And does this entity have a name?
It's up to you to determine what you wish to call your own higher mind. Remember, this is you. You keep referring to it as this entity. It's not separate from you. This is, you are an aspect of it. You are a projection of it. It is reflecting qualities to you that you contain, even as a physical being.
Okay. And
use them in life. Go boldly forward.
Okay. And I feel like somebody or something has been trying to connect with me.
Did we not just talk about it?
Yes, you did.
All right. Don't separate what is not separated in terms of a question. It is all the same thing that we're talking about here.
Okay.
Your higher self is showing you and giving you opportunities to make a stronger, aware connection with it so that you can move forward in life more fully as your true self, acting on your passions.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much.
You are so welcome. Aveo.
Hi, Bashar. This is Teresa. Can you talk about scapegoating? Why does scapegoating happen within a family? And what should a person do if they've been scapegoated their whole lives not to be socially marginalized? I grew up the scapegoat within my family, and I still have great difficulty feeling connected to other people, even in my old age. Thank you for all that you've done for me.
Where it is a badge of strength that you chose to be strong enough to, in a sense, take on the fears and lack of responsibility that other people have when they are not willing to look at their own issues and simply choose someone to foist them all and project them all upon. So it's a badge of strength that you were willing to do this for them, but you must reflect, if you are to be true to yourself, the idea that rather than continuing as a scapegoat, it's possible for you, though they don't have to accept it, that you can return information to them that allows them the opportunity to face their own fears and not foist them off on you, to allow them to take responsibility for their own negative and fear-based belief systems that they are simply unwilling to face, which is why people create scapegoats, because they fear the responsibility, because they define it as blame, and they are coming from a place of less than worthiness, and so on and so forth. But you have decided to be strong enough to play the part that allows them to use you, in a sense, as an excuse to not face themselves. But you don't have to continue to do so if you can respond appropriately, that puts them in touch with the idea that they need to look at themselves and their own issues if they really wish to expand in life. But that means you can go on without feeling like a scapegoat or experiencing the effects of being one, if you take the responsibility to reflect to them what it is they are actually reflecting to you about their...
And then got a surprise diagnosis of having AML leukemia, which is a very dangerous, very rapidly evolving type of blood cancer.
Yes.
And I decided not to go the typical route, which would be chemo. Instead, I decided to go home and do a detox.
All right.
And so I'm 2 weeks in, and so far it's going extremely well. And I just wanted to talk to you about that. If you had anything to add to that.
You understand that we cannot discuss health issues.
Yes, absolutely.
All right. So all we can say is that you had the wisdom to create a synchronicity that would reveal to you something that you needed to pay attention to.
Right. Right. And so I'm not necessarily asking for advice at all. I just thought if there's anything else there, because I feel like this is a pretty big life event for me.
It is. And it depends on what you do with it. It depends on what you learn about yourself through this process and this experience, which is why most people create these kinds of experiences for themselves. You can ask yourself the question, what is it focusing me on that otherwise I may not have focused on? That's usually what the important issue is in why this has been created by you as a process or an experience.
Yeah.
First and foremost, again, as I said, the synchronicity of the wisdom tooth leading you to this particular awareness. So you can start your synchronistic symbols there, but again, explore the idea. And you will know more about this as you go through the process of what it is getting you to focus on that you might otherwise not have focused on had you not created this. Not that you necessarily need it, but obviously at one point you believed you did, because this is what you felt you needed to bring your attention to something that will be very important for you to pay attention to within your life, about the kind of choices you're making and the kind of changes that you prefer to make in your life. And you have to know this will help you make them more easily if you learn the lessons and pay attention to what it is you are being forced to focus on by having this experience in your life.
Right. And so
that is what we will say.
Yeah, and so I find it so interesting because I actually find this whole situation pretty exciting.
All right. That is a good state of being to stay in so that you can experience the information and the lessons you need to learn in a positive way.
Yeah, and I think one thing that's really come out for me is that one thing that I'm most excited about is that I feel like through this journey, I can also show people that there's alternatives.
Yes.
And not in any way to diss medicine at all. I mean, I think medicine...
No. Again, it's whatever the path of least resistance is for those who have certain belief systems. That's what works.
Right. And so I find this to be a much more joyful, much more effortless path in a way that doesn't contain suffering in the way that chemo does.
All right. Again, if things change for you, go with the flow. Go with the path of least resistance, as synchronicity not only brings you objects, situations, circumstances, opportunities, and symbols to move and guide you forward, but sometimes also, as synchronicity will, prevent you from moving down certain paths, again, as a guiding mechanism that's not necessarily your path of least resistance at this moment.
Right. That makes sense. So we'll just see how it goes, because right now I'm on day 11, I think.
Oh, all right.
So, which is also synchronistic, I guess.
All right. Well, thank you for your willingness to experience your power strongly enough to go through this process and learn what it is you need to learn for your expansion and your growth.
Yeah, and it's also interesting because I felt like when I was in the hospital and the doctors would talk to me, and there was very much a sense of urgency that I needed to start chemo right away, and it was dangerous, and like every day I waited, it was going to be more dangerous.
Yes.
And I never felt scared.
All right.
You know, and I think many people in my situation would be scared of dying or other
Many people might, yes.
And so I felt that the whole time I was able to remain in this place of calmness and realize that is like a valid path to choose, of course, but like it was never my path, and I never felt like I needed to go down that path.
All right. Again, just pay attention to your synchronicities to guide you as to exactly how the path needs to flow.
Right.
As long as you are not ruling anything out, you will be open to receiving from synchronicity the appropriate path for you at any given moment.
Right. And so do you have any comments? Because I hadn't thought about that it was my wisdom tooth extraction that kind of brought, not that it caused it, but it like brought this whole situation to the surface.
Yes, that's what I already addressed. You were wise enough, wisdom enough to use that as a symbol to move you into the situation and circumstance you needed in order to receive this information.
Right. Right. Okay.
What else does it need to represent?
Mm-hmm.
Is that not a sufficient symbol?
No, it's great. It's great.
All right. Then there's nothing else that needs to be said about it. You don't have to overthink it or overcomplicate it.
Right. Okay. May I ask you some other questions unrelated?
Well, that was a question. So what other questions do you have?
So I was always wondering, with your civilization, your planet is Essassani, right?
Yes.
And so do you ever consider living on more than one planet, or how come you only stay on the one when you have the technology to?
I never said we only stay on the one.
Okay.
That's an assumption on your part.
Okay, that's valid. Yeah. So then that is your home world, but then you also have colonized other worlds.
Yes.
Okay. And so is Essassani the most populous world, or are other ones more populous?
It depends upon the environment. It depends upon the purpose of settling on a particular planet as to what drives the needs of the population there. Our homeworld usually never exceeds somewhere in the neighborhood of about 300 million.
Yeah.
It is an average that in general is maintained on the colony worlds, but there can be more or less, again, depending upon the nature of the planet and the purpose for why we might be there.
Right. And when you meet other civilizations,
yes,
do most of them communicate with you telepathically, or do you also?
A lot of them do, but some of them do not.
Okay. And so then how do you communicate with those other races? Is it like via technology or?
Well, first of all, remember that we usually make contact with planets in the same way we're making contact with yours.
Mm-hmm.
We have a connection to an individual through whom we may channel information, which then automatically comes out in their language, of course, because we're not speaking English right now.
Right.
So the idea is that we communicate that way, but doesn't mean we don't have the capacity to learn someone's language.
Right. Right. And so in your alliance of worlds,
yes,
is everybody there telepathic, or it's the same thing where some races are and some races are not, and they communicate via other means?
Some races are and some races are not.
Okay. And so could you give a couple examples of the races that are not telepathic, how they communicate? Is it verbal? Is it via like?
Some will communicate verbally in their own language as you would understand it. Some communicate by vibration. Some communicate by color shifts and changes. There are even those that communicate through what you might call electromagnetic waves.
Yeah. Yeah. Super interesting.
Yes.
Yeah. And so do you ever colonize planets together with other races, or is it?
We have done so sometimes for various purposes, but it's not necessarily that common.
Yeah. And so if distance isn't really a thing at all, then the planets that you colonize, they can be anywhere in the universe, right? It doesn't matter like which galaxy they're in, because space and time.
Fundamentally, no, it does not matter. But it will be based on certain other parameters that we don't necessarily go into right now.
Right.
But there may be certain reasons for why we may maintain a particular connection to something that isn't necessarily that far away, as you would say, in your sense of distance.
Yeah.
It just depends.
Yeah.
But no, distance in that sense is not really an issue.
Yeah. Yeah, super interesting. Does your Alliance of Worlds have any kind of rules as to colonizing planets and like how many you can colonize or where they are, or is?
Well, guidance perhaps that best serves. But the idea is, of course, there is always the non-interference directive of making sure that we don't interfere with civilizations that already exist in a way that would be detrimental to them. We only colonize worlds, as you use that term, that don't necessarily have habitation on them. So the idea is there are guidelines and so on and so forth, but not anything you would really call a hard and fast rule in the way that humans tend to think of those things.
Right.
Because again, remember, we operate on pure synchronism.
Yeah.
So the idea is that we synchronistically wind up exactly where we need to be, doing exactly what we need to do that serves the best of all concerned.
Right. And so for your race, because you're transitioning to quasi-physical, is there any need?
No, we are quasi-physical. We're
right.
transitioning to non-physical.
Right. Sorry. Apologies.
No apology necessary.
Do you have any need at all to exercise in any way, or like move your body in any certain way, or like mental?
Well, we do move our bodies, but we don't really have a need to exercise in the way that you think of it. No.
Right.
Remember, we also no longer eat and no longer sleep.
Right. Are there any kind of mental trainings that you do, or like any type of training at all?
Well, I went through a training period to learn to become a first contact specialist. So yes, it depends on what you're doing.
Right. Right. That makes sense.
I know. That's why I said it.
Yeah. No, I think that was it, Bashar. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
All right. We thank you for the interaction. Good day.
Good day. Thank you.
Misstep on one of these steps. Like if we look into a conspiracy theory or get into some religious spiritual argument with someone, if we notice it, learn from how it feels and adjust, are we back on track, so to speak? Is there anything more we need to do if that happens?
No. If you learn from it, then if you go back into the instruction in the way it was delivered, then you are back on track. So learn a lesson, learn why you may have desire to engage in that way, and then get back into the vibrational state as encouraged by the step. And realize that it's not necessary to venture that way again. Unless you do, then again, learn from it, learn why you chose to go in that direction. This can be used, like a lot of other things, to determine what your belief systems are and why you choose to do what you do. So if you use it that way, then you are learning, you are growing. But again, the idea is to realize that there is no need to do it, and that following the instruction more precisely will be to your advantage in creating the vibrational frequency that will bring you into alignment with contact and the interstellar alliance, if that is what you prefer.
Okay. And in step one, you said not to engage in discussions about conspiracy theories in general. Given that the UFO cover-up has been considered as conspiracy theory, but is an actual conspiracy, would engaging in conversation about it be considered going against the rule of step one?
No, because it is beyond theory at this point. There are too many witnesses, too many sources, too many verifications from many different people. And therefore, it is out of the category of theory. So you can research, you can discuss. It has been suppressed and covered up. At this point, it is relatively obvious that there is enough research, enough validation from so many different sources of different types that you can consider it to be something that is real.
And does watching videos or stories about true or not true conspiracy theories and stories go against the interstellar experiment? What I mean is, I enjoy watching these forms of entertainment without being emotionally affected.
If it is research, if you can remain neutral in observing all of the input from those particular presentations, then it is research. But the idea is to Allow yourself to pay attention to whether you are becoming caught up in it once again, if you ever were, and to remain neutral in the observation of those things so that you don't necessarily develop a strong opinion in one direction or another about what is true about them or not. If it is too challenging for you to not form an opinion, to not have strong perspectives on what it is you are watching, what it is you are absorbing, then again, it would be best for now to back off and remain neutral and maybe not absorb as much of the information. But if you can remain completely neutral, completely objective, and allow it all to simply be information for the purpose of research, then it is fine. But you have to pay attention honestly as to whether that's what you're doing or not.
Okay, and because you will be discussing in step 3 writing letters to specific individual officials around the globe regarding disclosure of UFO contact, and in doing so providing specific wording for us to use, I would appreciate if you could also give us instructions for non-native speakers of English. Is it okay to translate the wording you provided into our own native language and use it in whatever ways you may suggest? And is it okay to share what I have translated with the people of my own country who would also like to join the social experiment, so they can also send letters to specific individuals?
Yes, that is fine. However, one suggestion we would have would be, don't necessarily rely on your own translation unless you are a professional interpreter, a professional translator who is absolutely certain that your translation is accurate in terms of the intention and meaning behind the words that are delivered in English. So you can translate it into different languages, but for those who are not proficient at the translation, then we would suggest that you find someone who is and ask them if the translation, or ask them to translate it in a way that captures fully the exact meaning of the original language. So if you can do that, and you can know that it is accurately representative, then that is fine.
And also, one question that came up, some individuals may feel anxiety about being perceived as some sort of target or part of some conspiracy or something in their land. And what are some suggestions for dealing with anxiety about, in a sense, sticking out or making yourself, I guess you'd say, a target or something like that?
Well, this simply goes back to some of the original ideas we have discussed for many years. You have to examine your belief system and find out why you are perceiving this in a fear-based or negative way. If the idea is too challenging for you, then as we have said, it's up to you to decide not to be a part of the social experiment. As the word implies, it is a social experiment, which means it requires interaction with society. So if you find that too challenging and are unable to let go of any fear-based or negative beliefs you have surrounding your participation in this social experiment, then don't participate. Otherwise, get in touch with your belief systems as to why you believe that it would be a negative thing to move forward in this way, and learn to let them go. Learn to let those beliefs go. Learn to transform them into something more positive so that you can be coming from your self-empowerment, your indestructible core. But again, as always, it is up to you to decide whether this is something that you are capable of participating in or not.
And also the idea of, I guess, thousands of letters going out all over the planet. What do you anticipate would be the reaction from administrative levels of our planet to that kind of thing, onslaught happening?
One particular reaction would be that they understand that there is organization to these thoughts, that there is unification to these thoughts, that there is similarity beyond borders. beyond cultures. This is something that can awaken them to realize that this is an important issue to look at, an important issue to address. Beyond that, there is no insistence or expectation, but we know that that recognition will occur in many individuals when they see a massive amount of individuals, regardless of country, regardless of background, regardless of other belief systems, unified in the idea of requesting the release of this information.
Okay. And when you talk about the hybridization agenda by the Greys, it sounds like humanity agreed to it in some higher level, that the Earth becoming the sixth hybrid race is a part of that agenda, and this has already been decided. If humanity on a conscious level became aware of this as a fact, it would have been looked at as a silent, covert invasion and not something positive or beneficial. I suppose this is why it is being carried out in secret from the majority of the population. How would you explain this conundrum? Is the slow drip disclosure a part of making the general population accustomed to the idea? Would not carrying out this agenda result in humanity going the path of the negative timeline the Greys experienced?
No.
And without white lies, how would you explain it if you had an opportunity to have a transmission that the entire Earth could hear?
Again, the idea is that understanding your connection to your galactic family, awakening to your true potential, awakening to the agreements that you have made for the evolution of humanity, would do exactly the opposite of allowing you to go down the negative path that the Greys took. It would allow you more opportunity to choose the path that you prefer in a positive way. The idea of secrecy is, as you say, euphemistically, a kind of drip system that allows humanity to get used to the idea, but it is also what gives humanity the time to awaken and remember that they made this agreement, so that it doesn't feel forced, so that it doesn't feel like an invasion, as you say, so that you can take responsibility for the part you are playing in having made an agreement from a higher level to aid and assist in the evolution of humanity in this format, in this way. And it is the acceptance of this responsibility and the awakening to the memory of the choice that you made as